everybody. Welcome to the Writing Gals. We are talking about craft again today, and we are so excited to dive into that. But first, we're going to talk about what we've been up to. So, Anne-Marie, do you want to start?
Sure. So I published my last book in my Red Stiletto book club series last week, the week before, I can't remember. At some point, so whenever the 18th one, I finished and published it. Thank goodness. I was really down to the wire with that one. So I was happy that that one's out. That series is now done. And I'm getting lots of reviews of people sad that it's ended, which is a positive, which means they went on this journey with me. But I have a lot planned for a new series this coming year. So they're still going to see those characters. So hopefully I have a flagship series that I can then sell other series to. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Nice.
So then I've just been releasing my fairy tale prophecy series because Laura convinced me to do it because fantasy sells well on TikTok. So I'm kind of doing a TikTok trial where that's the only way people know about it and seeing kind of how it's really selling my book. It is not in KU, so it's not going to be as easy, but I do like being wide on other platforms, so I'm enjoying that. And then I told myself I'll start writing again next month because right now I'm just working on getting my paperbacks fixed because they're bad and some of them weren't even up, and Amazon changed their templates, and I'm making hardcovers for all of my books, so it takes a long time. Like I have like 57 books. Yes. So I'm like, I have to show you. It's crazy. So I marked down like each of my books, right, in my planner. And like, hold on. These are like, you see this?
Wow.
Green dots are what I've done.
That's awesome.
Are stuff I have to, it says the book, the series, the book number, then ebook, paperback, and hard copy. So I have a very long ways to go. And it takes me an entire day to do like 6. Yeah. Because it's just, and then it's like waiting for Amazon. There's a lot of waiting around time and stuff. So I'm just trying to figure out my life. Like I keep telling, I'm going through some crises and just trying to be like, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I want to be an author, of course, and then we also got some news about my daughter. She has a very rare genetic syndrome, so we're also coping with that. And I'm just so grateful I have this job that I could just take time off and I can still make money and my family is not like struggling and and then I escaped through TikTok and doing videos. I came up with a really cool strategy, which I'm really excited to try to see if it works. And taking courses and stuff. So it's just kind of just getting this. I think sometimes we talk about like, let's do writing retreats or sprints. And I'm like, sometimes I just need say to tell me to sit down and do all this other crap that you've been putting off and don't want to do. And so like, I'm really trying to give myself this quarter, but then I also have a book due. The next book in my next women's fiction series is due in May. And I don't want to be down to the wire with that one again. So that's why I'm like, February comes, write 1,500 words a day and you'll be on track. Definitely. When you have 57 books out, you don't want to write any more books because just the volume of things you have to do is overwhelming. And so I'm like, put 1 or 2 books out this year. I'll be good. Like, I don't need a whole lot more out. And then trying to get what I have selling. That's a big thing. But I get in my head and maybe I'm the only one. I know I'm taking a lot of time, but
that's okay.
We don't have a 4th person here, so you're gonna just have Amy word vomit. And then I lose my train of thought. Oh, okay.
So I'm talking about all your books.
I'm scared, or I'm like something. I'm gonna have an ad that's gonna do amazing, or I'm gonna have a TikTok that goes viral, but I don't have the paperback, and I don't have the hard copy, and I don't have an audiobook to push them to. Well, that's sales I'm missing, and so I kind of feel like I want to start doing advertising, but if I don't have the paperbacks up of it, people buy paperbacks. You'll be surprised. And so I'm like, I need to have all this stuff in place, and then really, really take off with the selling. So. Anyways, that's what I'm doing. Super exciting.
Awesome. That's cool. No, I totally get you because when I went wide, like, when was it? Like November, I decided to go wide. I still don't have all books up on all platforms because I had to reformat stuff and, update my back matter and all of that. And there's just so much to do. And so, yeah, I'm with you.
I've been supposed to be doing that this month and I'm avoiding it and you're making it worse, Victoria.
Sorry.
And well, you're just like, I just promise myself and the world that I will never do, like, I will have everything in place, every book I publish next. Like from here on out, I will always have the paperback, the ebook, the links, all of that ready to go in that book, and then slowly go into my backlist and get that fixed. But
yeah.
An author's job never ends. It just never ends. You just kind of abandon things. There's like, all right, well, whatever.
I totally agree. All right, Michelle, what are you up to?
So I just literally finished writing my episode for the day. And it was my episode for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday as well. So I'm behind. Today I should have been writing for another Vela story, but that's okay because I have the rest of the day today and what is today? Friday and Saturday left this week. So I just keep telling myself if my goal right in this current month is to write 3 episodes a week, I can still pull it off. Like, so what if I suffered through like avoidance and procrastination for 3 days? I'm not dead in the water yet. So I really like Kindle Vella because it both makes me like it makes things a little more flexible for me, but it also gives me closer deadlines that are compelling to me. So with my ADHD before, if I have a whole novel to write, what I tended to do is not write for like 3 weeks and then try and write everything in 1 week, and that killed me. And so this just makes me have like more urgent deadlines that come every week, and that keeps me on track a lot better. So I guess my daughter's yelling at my dog for something. Sorry. So anyways, I'm super excited because I finished that and it's going really well. And it's also, we're like at the very, 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 I feel like I've been saying this for a long time, very, very, very end of my co-written Kindle Vella story, which means that I am now thinking about our title, our cover, and our launch for when we take it to the actual like Kindle, ebook, paperback platform and all the stuff that entails. And I've never launched like that with another author before. Plus, we've been working on this for a year now, and I really want it to do well. And it's also really exciting, guys, because I think I've mentioned this before, but our story has already made about 11 grand.
That's
on
awesome.
Kindle Vella before we've even published it like we originally planned to. So I'll take that as a win, and it's just really comfortable knowing that like we have the resources to put into a good launch if we want to. And
Isn't that just like amazing?
Yes.
Like you've made 11 grand off a book as you were writing it.
As I was writing it.
That's so awesome.
Yes. The last couple months I've made more on that story that wasn't finished yet than like my whole backlist. And it's just like, because my backlist is like my forgotten child at the moment. Sadly, got to start taking care of them. I was thinking about that. I know we're like all over the place today, but I was looking at some of the dead houseplants around my house, and I'm like, that is exactly the problem with my writing career too. It's like I get them and they look so pretty, and for a while I have so much fun with them, and then I abandon them and they slowly die because they can't say, "Hey, Michelle, pay attention to me," like my kids can. Yeah. And then they just die, and that's kind of my backlist at the moment. One time they were super precious to me. I loved them to death, and then I just forget about them and they wither away. So I'm about to have to do some plant doctoring.
You forget what you even wrote. And then you read it again, you're like, oh, wow, I'm not a bad writer.
Yeah, like I found some plants on a dusty shelf in the playroom, and I was like, oh, you exist. Okay. So anyways, it's just like one of those things that I feel like I'm just going to have to do some plant doctoring on my backlist. And they haven't died completely. The good thing is books are eternal, and you can bring them to life again. And I just have to remember that. But I just really torn because I am enjoying the writing so much more than the business stuff right now. Anyway, that's my life.
Awesome.
There you go.
Well, I'm really glad you got an episode done. I got an episode out in my Kindle Vella story too. I published it like yesterday or the day before. So I was really excited to get that out and done. I've also finished my novella that I was working on for this giveaway thing that we're doing. I'm so happy to be done with that because then I can go move on to these other exciting things I'm working on. So yes, working on the Kindle Vella and finishing that stupid book I started last year and never finished. So I swear to my readers, I will get it done.
I've got 2 of those like abandoned stories that my readers I got a response to my newsletter yesterday, and it was like, yeah, I loved your newsletter, but when is this book coming out already? And I get those from time to time, and I'm like, would you just forget about it? Would all of you just forget that you loved my last series and I'm now tired of?
I am never again going to advertise that I'm writing something until it's done. It's like, it's going to be a super secret. I don't know what I'm writing. Because if I don't finish it, then I have 100 people emailing me. When is this out? When is this out?
I'm only going to brand things as a series when I've got all the books out. And I'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, guess what? This was a series, guys. And it's done.
Yes, we were watching that one movie, what's it called? Unbreakable, is that what it's called? It was the it was the first movie where they did a stealth sequel, and that's why this is important to this conversation. They did the sequel to that movie and didn't tell anybody it was a sequel to that movie until after it was already out.
That's amazing though.
Makes me laugh. Anyway, let's dive into our discussion today about craft, and we're going to start with flaws and strengths. So the actual question was, I need some examples of character flaws and strengths because I don't really understand that. So let's talk about character flaws and strengths and what it means, and maybe some examples of some that you've used in your books.
So I tried to make some notes again this week, and I know it's always good. See if Michelle can be brief. Flaws are important. We hear all the time about how characters are too perfect, especially our main characters in romances. And so readers really want to see these flawed individuals. And I definitely agree that they need flaws. They make them more human. They make them relatable. They help us to want to root for somebody. But they can also make your characters really unlikable.
Yes.
And so it's really, really hard. I think other genres are able to play a little bit more with giving your main characters like really strong flaws because they have more of a redemptive arc to them most of the time, or the character needs to be seriously flawed for the plot. So like in a lot of mysteries, for example, the detective character will be like really flawed. Like he'll be like a drunk, he'll be lazy,
Yes.
he will have like a chip on his shoulder, be really arrogant, like all of these like really, really hardcore. Like he could have all of those flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as he's good at solving mysteries and at getting the lady, I'm turning back to like 1940s movies I used to watch with like what's his name? I'll come back to that name if I'm reminded. But anyways, but in romance, not so much. Like you couldn't have an arrogant, drunkard, lazy hero in a romance very easily. Like you would, it would be a specific kind of romance for one thing, and it would be really hard to make him something that readers would enjoy reading about. So you just have to know. It's one of the things you have to know your genre. And know like how much your readers are willing to tolerate, because if they're wanting to fall in love with this guy, they don't want to see the same flaws in him that make them not like the guys in their real life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of like what I always try and weigh is like, can I give my hero this flaw? Well, would I like that in my husband? Do I see that in my husband? And you know, if it's something that like bothers me, then maybe I'm like, maybe that's not like the kind of sexy I want to put.
Yeah.
You know, but there are definitely flaws that can make your character more sexy, strangely enough, like being aloof or being like arrogant can sometimes just don't pair it with like a million other things. So
yeah, just think of Mr. Darcy and his flaws in
yes,
there.
yes, yes. So and that's kind of the thing, that flaws are also important because they will make your, like, they need to be things that your character will either overcome or improve on through the course of your story. That's for main characters. So like you mentioned, Mr. Darcy. So his pride and his arrogance was important because he had to get over it through the course of the story. He didn't completely change as a person. Like, he was always going to be, kind of higher brow or like looking down on certain people. But when it came to the specific person that he loved in his life, he had to stop being proud when it came to her and her family connections and bringing these unsavory people into his circle. And so that flaw was important for the plot of the story. It was the plot of the story. Yeah. With your secondary characters, their big flaws need to directly impact your main character. They either need to cause conflict for them, or they need to serve as a foil for your main character to make them look better. If they're not performing one of those two roles, you're probably just like sprinkling a whole bunch of unnecessary flaws on your secondary characters. Two more things really quick. Minor flaws or small flaws are what usually tends to give people like their personality, a little bit of flavor, make them unique and identifiable. So they're usually like little quirks you give people. Just be careful with those though, because they can also be cliche, stereotypical, and even offensive. So just be really careful that you, as you're assigning out your flaws, that you're being aware of those things and make them fresh, make them fun, make them serve a purpose, and be sure you're not just making your blonde dumb because blondes are always considered to be dumb. Like that is offensive and stereotypical. So those are my thoughts on flaws for now.
Beautiful. Anne-Marie, do you have any thoughts, or are you good?
I would just say, if you're going to give them a flaw, make sure the flaw is integral to their entire life. So one thing would be like, or if you were to give them a struggle or an issue, it has to come, like they have to overcome that flaw in order to move forward in a relationship. Don't just put flaws or issues they may have in there to make the tension more, but then have it disappear when it should still be there. And
like when it's inconvenient.
Fixing the billionaire. Yeah. So like I wrote Fixing the Billionaire, and his whole plot is the fact that he feels so horrible that he wasn't there for when his daughter passed away, that he is going around and paying off medical bills for people. And that's when he meets the heroine, and they don't kiss till like the end of the book, because he had to overcome this struggle he was going through, this internal flaw where I am not a good person, before he could fully love this heroine. And I wanted to have them to kiss, but he had to do that. And if I did, it would feel disingenuous, because you would not like him then, because you'd be like, well, he's just going around kissing girls and he's supposed to feel bad about his daughter. So be very cognizant about the flaws that you give, because they have to continue to have those flaws. So like Sherlock Holmes, he's very, very aloof, very, meticulous. Like, he has to be that way with his romantic relationships as well. You can't have him all of a sudden being like, oh, I know what she's thinking and lovey-dovey. It would feel not good. So make sure that you give them flaws and that it continues all the way to the story until you wrap it up or address it in a way that feels satisfactory. If not, your readers are really going to dislike your hero. And the same thing goes with your heroine. And I like what Michelle said. Don't be a stereotype. Don't stereotype certain characters. And I was going to say something else, but I can't remember.
That's okay. So there is a book that is available that's called The Negative Trait Thesaurus. And I have that book, and it's just a whole bunch of negative flaws that you can give your characters. And so if you're like, oh, I really need a negative flaw for my character, but I have no idea what to do, you can look through that. It goes into detail of each flaw and talks about, how this might affect your character. So that is one I recommend.
I would
And
say
also
just
give them flaws. Like, I hate reading characters or books where everyone's perfect. Like,
Yeah.
you want to give them flaws.
Yes.
Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, real quick, Sally wants to know if that's by the same author as the emotion thesaurus. Okay.
Yep, it is.
So I was just gonna say, like, I love the thought of like having that resource, but I'd also warn people, like, don't just go randomly, oh, that sounds good, that sounds good,
Right.
that sounds good. Like, it has to make sense for your plot. It has to advance your plot. It has to be meaningful. And just like we talk about tropes all the time, like when you just like are like building your story, that each of the tropes plays a certain and specific role in a plot. And so you can kind of like use that to like be your building block and design it as it is. Like, just remember, flaws do exactly the same thing. Like, they're going to influence every decision your character makes. They're going to influence how they interact and all of the struggles and hurdles and how they get through them. So like these are big pieces. So just be careful that you're doing it with a purpose and not just like randomly assigning things.
Absolutely. And I will say one more thing. When I'm a discovery writer or a pantster, but sometimes I like to, kind of figure out my characters, and I'll jot some notes down, and I want this character to have this flaw. But when I'm in the process of writing, that character comes alive for me. And I have had this situation where I am trying to force a flaw on this character. They don't have this flaw, or they're not coming alive in this way. And so I have to go and change what I had written down. And I've seen this in other people too, as I'm beta reading other people. Some people, they're like, okay, this is my character, and they're trying to force it. And you can feel it, because they're forcing this certain thing on their character, and they're not coming alive that way for them. And it's like, okay, just drop that. If it's just not working, drop it. Find something else that's their flaw. What inherently is coming out in you. So you have to be flexible in that too. You are the writer, but you are also the writer. So you can change something if you feel like it's not working.
So my vampire story, I was making my vampire guy like aloof and mysterious, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But then like halfway through what I've written, I was like, wait a second, he's being way too flirtatious and chatty and like warm. And I was like, what is going on here? And so normally maybe I would go back and rewrite the beginning, but I can't because it's released and people are reading it. But then I had this realization, like, it's what is it that makes him like clam up and be aloof, and what situation can I put him in where that comes back, and like how would that influence or impact their relationship? Because maybe he opened up for her because of her personality, and then something comes in and makes him like, it's not a lost cause. I just have to go back to square one and remember, why is he that way, and keep circling back in there on his character arc.
Yeah.
So anyway, it kind of makes your characters multifaceted that way too, to show that they can be different with different people. And we are all that way. True.
Very true. All right. Do we want to talk about character strengths, or did we kind of touch on that enough that we're done with flaws and strengths?
I had a few notes on it.
Okay.
Strengths can make your characters likable because we like to root for somebody that is funny or super smart or super capable, but it can also make them super annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just whether or not it's like too perfect kind of stuff, but it can be if they have too many strengths. Even if you give them a lot of flaws, if you give them too many strengths, it's annoying. And I think what makes it annoying is if you make it so that their strengths allow them to overcome the conflict too easily, right?
Yes.
So like be sure that the strengths you give them don't allow them to sort of like leap over these story hurdles without any problem. Like their strengths should not give them too much of a leg up. And and that's why a lot of times I like it when whatever they have to do to accomplish their goal is completely outside of their wheelhouse. It's something that they're not good at. And then they have to grow and develop new strengths along the way. A lot of times it's good to have them be blind to their own strengths even. And then like as part of their realization of the truth or the theme of the story, they also come to recognize new parts of themselves, and other people in the story can help them to recognize their strengths. Strengths can also be cliche, so be careful. But one thing you can do to make strengths more interesting is to understand that strengths can be taken to extremes and thus become flaws.
Yes.
And that is the really interesting play. And sometimes your flaws, if used in the right way or in the right situation, can actually be a strength. And I think that that's, if you can understand that dichotomy between strengths and flaws, then it can help you to use them in more interesting ways. And I think you should also pair the strengths of, like, especially like in a romance, but in any book, the strengths of one character should be the flaw, should match the flaw of another character, and vice versa. And so that as they work together, they're going to need each other, they're going to clash with each other, they're going to like grow from each other. And that's what causes chemistry. So I've taught a whole class on chemistry between characters, and not just with romantic characters, but any two characters on stage together. And what causes more chemistry than anything else is when they are opposites of each other, and they are either in conflict with each other, or the two of them are playing off of each other in an interesting way because they have different strengths and flaws. Also, show don't tell. That is my final thing on strengths and flaws. Don't come out, well, he was a super smart guy who always did his job well and got promotion after promotion because he was so good at what he did, and he always brushed his teeth at night. You know, like, I think too often we just want to be like, here's how awesome they are, or like have your character always complaining like, oh, he's such a jerk, like all the time. But like, just show them being a jerk. Right. Show them being awesome. Show them being smart. Because the reader is going to be so much more interested if they're having to pick up the clues and make their own assessment of your character.
All right, perfect. And we have a question here. Katie is wondering, can you give an example of that? Strength in one character versus a flaw in another. And I have an example if you don't. All right. So I wrote a book where the main male character was super reserved, super uptight, and the female character was just like really spontaneous and almost to her detriment but he was uptight almost to his detriment. So both of them were like the extremes of each other. And so they had to learn to kind of come to more middle ground and be more like each other.
Yeah. So one thing that's always fun in romance is when one of them is really good at picking up on people's emotions, and one of them is like completely clueless and doesn't know how to like read the room, you know. And there are places for both. There are places where both can definitely be an asset, and if you can really establish your two characters as being opposites like that, then in any scene it will change the dynamic. Like, however you have it outlined, as soon as your characters start playing together in that kind of like clash of strengths and weaknesses, then, like I said, it creates a lot of chemistry. And you can look at most sitcoms that do really well, and you can see that the characters are opposites of each other. Like, if you look at Big Bang Theory, I don't know any of their names, but like the main guy, and then like the girl that lived across the hall from them, like just the fact that she was like freewheeling and like loved life and vibrant, and everything was kind of messy. And like the main guy was like, had a lot of those sort of everything is literal, everything has to be exactly as prescribed. He doesn't like, just those kinds of things. You can look at almost anything and start diagnosing or like saying like, oh, this is their flaw, this is their strength. Well, this is their strong, their strength. Look, you will see that anytime characters are interesting when they get together, it's because they're not the same as each other.
Yeah, and like you said, you can watch sitcoms or movies, or look at the different characters of Harry Potter or the different characters in Friends. They all have their own personalities that are kind of opposite of each other. So you're right.
Like you're right, like Harry and Hermione. Like he was excited to be at Hogwarts, and he was loyal, but he wasn't super good at like the academic side of things. Obviously Hermione was, but she wasn't very good at like social things. And so yeah, we could go on and on. You get the point.
All right, let's talk about goals. Inner goals. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm like, this is a podcast between Victorine and Michelle. I would say be careful that their strength is something that's unrealistic. And I think about like Harry Potter and Twilight, Bella, where their strength was something that didn't make sense. Like, I'm sorry, but Harry Potter, I get this all like in my head. How on earth is his mom's love the thing that saved him from Voldemort? Like, everybody's mom loves them. So every person he killed had a mom that loved him. That makes no sense to me at all. Like, I'm
We're gonna get all this hate now, Anne-Marie.
She stands on her own.
I liked Harry Potter until like the 5th book, and then I gave up. But that wasn't a strength enough to me. That didn't give me hero enough vibes to be like,
well, and it wasn't his strength either.
Yeah.
No, right. But I was just like, every mom loves their kid. And then you have Bella, who had this strength, but her strength was not having strength. Like, it was just weird. And by the time they got to the point to explain it, you were like, huh? Really?
What are you saying her strength was again?
It was not her strength. Like, remember she found out like her power was like to be a boring person.
Shielding. It was shielding other power.
Oh, okay.
That's what it was. Like, I can't even remember what her power was, but you still got to that, and you were like, well, that. Like, how did she have that when she wasn't even a vampire yet? Like, how is she?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so obviously you have like these personality quirks, but like if you're gonna go with something big, like this person is special because they have this incredible strength. It's got to be a good reason. Like, there's got to be a good strength there, because if not, you're just gonna kind of like, yeah,
Well, yeah,
and like you're not gonna enjoy it. At least
I've been watching some wuxia. Like Chinese dramas are his like historical fantasy, and like they have like magic powers and stuff like that. And it's always really funny to me, and a lot of reviewers point this out too, that they have these big battles with all these armies, and they spend all this time learning how to like shoot arrows and fight with swords. But in the end, there's always these magical beings that come in and like crush a whole village with a wave they created. And it's like, if you make people too powerful or too strong in any way, too smart, too anything, then it's going to really like steal the foundations away from the conflict of your story.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I also think we get so scared to give our main characters those flaws and strengths. That's actually the side characters that start to take up more likability, where people actually enjoy those characters more. I'm like, we have the Lord of the Rings, which is like Frodo putting the ring, but Frodo's not the actual one who threw the ring in. It was Gollum died. You know what I mean? Like, and he was the hero of the story because he had to go through this journey of his own, And so it's like,
Sam was the hero.
Sam was a hero. But again, Frodo, or was it Gollum, or was it Sam? But it was supposed to be a story about Frodo, but in the end, and then you also have like, well, why didn't the Eagles just come in and take them to, Mordor and throw it in? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so we're talking about more like fantastical stories, but you have to think about like broader sense. Like, like my flaw is that I can't tell this person that I love them. Well, that's not a big enough flaw. Like you have to have more. You don't want people to be able to pick things apart in terms of your strengths and weaknesses, but you also don't want to make your person so boring with a lot of strength or not a lot of strength, and you give all that strength to the side character, because then that person's really going to steal the show. So it's a delicate balance, and good luck. I don't know how you're going to do it.
I know, right?
You just have to write better than Harry Potter and Twilight.
Well,
you know where you're going. I think all of them didn't think it was going to take off, so it just
Yeah.
made sense in book one, and then when you had to explain it in the end, you were like,
well, gosh, it was like the first book for all of them.
yeah.
Like, you know, and if my first book had blown up, then there would have been a lot of things exposed to people to point out.
Yeah.
So, that's why.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I was gonna say, that's why I always say, like, writing is a long-term process of learning, and the biggest part of it is writing. Like, you can listen to our podcast, and please do, but like, you have to do the work yourself of writing over and over again, and not just like focusing on one story for 5 years. Because if you do that, you're always going to be focusing on the same characters with the same flaws and weaknesses, and you're not going to keep learning from them. Every time you write a new story, you have the opportunity to learn something new, learn something more as an author, and grow. And that's what we're talking about. Like, you only learn how to create these dynamic character strengths and flaws and all the other parts we talk about in the story by doing it repetitively over and over and over again. Yep. What were you going to say, Rainer? Did you?
Oh, I was going to say, like, if you could give me a better reason why Harry Potter was so awesome, then I'll maybe change my mind. But what I know, he's only so cool because his mom's safe.
Don't give everybody that challenge.
I'm interested, but
the writing gal's inbox is filling up as we speak.
I think it's also important to like look at these shows that actually have the villain be the main character. Because I hear a lot of these stories. I haven't actually watched any of them, but like Dexter, where he's a serial killer, but they end up making you like him. Like sometimes watching those where the opposite person, where you wouldn't think would be the hero, actually becomes the hero, is also important to focus. Like, think of all the sorts of ways that you could create. Or like even you talked about Big Bang Theory. I mean, you had Sheldon, who's just started taking over the whole show, and he had a lot of flaws, but he actually became the more interesting of the characters. So I would study and make sure that you are not just looking at, the straight A hero, person. Like, if play around with different types of characters, how can you make them more likable and more relatable?
Absolutely. My family just watched Doctor Strange, and my sister was like, he is so unlikable. He is so unlikable, because at the beginning of that show, he's really unlikable, and then they make you like him.
Yep. Well, okay, so this is interesting. I was thinking about all these different story ideas, and let's talk. Have you guys seen Encanto yet? Like, the whole world has seen Encanto, but okay. So it was so funny because when we were watching it, my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter, was screaming at the grandma because she was so mad at her for the way she was treating Mirabelle, right? And she had a lot of very obvious flaws as a character, right? But what was so good about Encanto was that they were able to bring it back around at the end and let us know why she had those flaws. Let us truly understand her journey as a person that had led her to become what she was at that time. And then we were able to see her be redeemed. Right? And that is why it was so powerful. Flaws are important because they also help us to understand how we can overcome our own flaws, or we see ourselves reflected in these characters. And I would even say we see ourselves in characters' flaws more than we see ourselves in their strengths. Mm-hmm. And so as long as we remember the purpose of flaws and how, like, they're buried gold. I mean, if you can just mine them out of a character and dig deep, and you see like what it really is, it can kind of like shine in the darkness.
And like you said, don't just give them a flaw, give them the reason why, give them the backstory as to why they have that flaw, and that will make them a much better character.
It makes the flaws matter too, if you know why they have it.
Mhm.
Like, if you know why someone's a jerk, or if you know why somebody is afraid to speak or afraid to go out of their house. You know, all of these different things. Just make it so that we know why and we get it. And that's where they become relatable. And then whether or not you redeem that character is up to you and your plot. But anyway.
Good. All right. Are we ready to go on to goals?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's talk about goals, inner and outer goals. And what does that mean?
I feel like all of these questions are like a podcast in and of themselves.
I know. We could teach a whole
Like
class on each one of these.
Yeah, I really like goals because like the majority of stories that I pick up and don't like, or that I critique by new authors, it's immediately obvious that they don't know what their character's goal is, or that their character doesn't have a strong enough goal. Like, I would say the vast majority of stories start having problems with character goals.
Yes.
So like that's again, like Amy said, or Emery said, good luck. Go ahead, Victory.
Don't make their goal, I want a family. I want someone to love.
Yes.
That is a weak goal. Don't do it.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's a very easy goal to satisfy.
Right.
Well, you know, and I think that is especially true for the outer goal. So
Yes.
what they are, so an outer goal is something that they're trying to accomplish, right? They're trying to get a promotion. They're trying to save their grandma's restaurant. They're trying to save the town. They're trying to take care of their sister's daughter. They're trying, you know, whatever. That's an outer goal. So it's something that they are physically trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
An inner goal starts with a need. And that need comes from the lie that they believe about themselves, which is all from their backstory. Okay. Mm-hmm. So like everybody has certain needs, and like one of them is to be loved. One of them is to be safe. You know, like those kind of needs we all connect with, but you need to really drill down to some degree and make it a little bit more specific if you can. So like, it's always like, yes, your character needs love. It's a romance. Of course they need love. But what makes it interesting is if you can like pull from their backstory and say like, their parents were divorced. Therefore, she doesn't have any security that love will last. So her need is to be able to have confidence in loving somebody, right? So something needs to happen that she can have trust or confidence. Or like maybe in her past, she was abandoned as a child, you know? And so then it's not just that she needs to have like that security, right? But she's going to have a lot of really internal like trauma over that. So what does that trauma look like as when she tries to like find future happiness? If you can really start dissecting what has happened to them and where they are and what they think about themselves, then you can really go forward. For example, kids that get abandoned think that they are worthless and that they have no value. And so if you understand what your character's been through, then you can say, okay, she needs to believe that she has value, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is the inner goal. And sometimes, this is what's really interesting about inner goals. Sometimes your character is able, and outer goals really, sometimes your character is able to say and be cognizant of what their goals are. But I would even say the best way to use story goals is to have false goals at the beginning of your story, where your character thinks this is what I need. And then you have the inciting incident and this conflict and all this stuff carry them through the journey of finding out what it was they really need. Yes. And having to like open themselves up to that and accept that and go after that. So maybe they need a promotion or think they want a promotion at the beginning of the story, but then something happens and they're like, okay, well, that's off the table now because I just walked into my boss's office and my skirt was tucked into my pants and my underwear was showing, and like whatever. You immediately ruin their chances of the promotion in the first chapter because that's not actually going to be their goal. The real goal of their story is that they're going to start their own business, to meet a need that they see in the, community.
So my favorite example of that is Toy Story, where Andy's goal is, I want to get rid of Buzz because I want to be the favorite toy, and Buzz is in the way.
Said butts, and I was like, Andy wants to get rid of butts. What do you mean? You mean Woody wants to get rid of Buzz?
Buzz Lightyear, yeah. Woody. What did I say? Andy? I meant Woody.
Then you got me distracted with Andy wants to get rid of butts, and I was like.
So Woody's goal is the lie he believes is, I will be happy if I'm the number one favorite toy, and he will go to any lengths, even chucking the other toy out the window to get his goal. But he finds out over the course of the movie that that's not really what he needs. He gets happiness and satisfaction out of the friendships and becoming friends with Buzz enlightens him, and he realizes that's not actually what I need. That's not what I want.
Pretty much any Pixar film is a masterclass in storytelling.
I think also as well, you can look at your character's flaws and figure out the goals that they're trying to put in place with themselves to keep their flaws intact. So like if somebody feels like they're unlovable, what is their goal that they're going to put in place to keep them keeping? Because as human beings, we feel very safe in our flaws, and we feel very safe in our negative thoughts of ourselves because that helps you not push out to the outer parts of you. So that could be a motivation for them to keep the love interest at bay because their flaw is thinking that they are not worthy of love. So that's another way to play into the whole flaws, goals. Like, what kind of goal would they have? What would they say? My goal, and because not all goals are positive. Like, some goals are negative, and my negative one is I don't want to get heartbroken. So my goal is going to keep that person way over there, because once they discover who I really am inside, they are not going to want to be in love with me anymore. So it's kind of all like a jumbled mess.
Do you know why romance is so hard to write? It's so hard to write because, number one, it's very difficult to have your character's goal be, I want to fall in love with this person, right? Like, it works better if their goal is to do everything not to fall in love with that person.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you could play around with them wanting to fall in love with the person, but that it's super hard because really romance has very little conflict. We do not have very many villains. If we're just talking straight romance, not like fantasy romance or romantic suspense or anything. We're talking straight, like pure romance. And that's your main plot and really your only plot. What villain do you have to come in and cause trouble? So the trouble comes from the goals that they can't, what is going to stop them from achieving their goals? And it's got to be the other person. You know what I mean? Almost all the time in some way.
I think it's also why some tropes just don't work for sweet. Because you also have steamy and sweet, and it's difficult to write both. It's really hard to write sweet, and it's really hard to write a sweet bully romance because I've done a couple of TikToks about how I'm a sweet romance author, and somebody was like, oh, well, I feel like steamy has more tension. And I was like, technically that's actually not true. Because and then I was talking to Kelsey about that, and she was saying, well, this is why bully romance and reverse harem are so hot and spicy, because it creates an outer conflict that you cannot create between two people who are already, having sex. So that, but as sweet authors, when we go to write a bully romance, it doesn't work because he's just a jerk all the time, and you just end up hating him as a character. So it's very interesting, that you bring that up. I was like, oh yeah, because that's why certain things just don't work, because you can't you can't make them work in that type of writing. And sweet is even more harder because you have to keep that tension going without making people feel like, okay, well, this is just dumb. Like, you know, if they just said that they were sorry, then they would get together and it'd be over, you know? So, and also why you can't have sweet romances that are 200,000 words long, because
Yeah.
you know, fantasies, you can just pick them up and move them somewhere else and then have like a whole half a book that they're not even next to each other anymore.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing that people always complain about in romances is when like the only thing keeping them apart is them not having a certain conversation, right? Like if they would just talk to each other, all of this would be solved. And that's when you know that your story, like your conflict wasn't strong enough to
It's a
begin
little
with.
weak. Yeah. It's a little weak.
But like if you don't know what your character's goals are, how the heck are you going to come up with a good conflict? And that's why I see so many stories struggle. And that's why I say, like, you need to start with your character's goals, because you could throw in a mean ex-girlfriend, you can throw in a bad boss, you can throw in like all these things that you think are going to cause conflict. But the conflict will not matter or make much impact on your characters unless it's directly opposing a goal, and it's a goal that they want really, really, really badly. So before you even start thinking about what your conflict is, like you need to figure out what your characters want more than anything and why they want it. And then you got to figure out, how do I keep them from getting it? You know? And so that's really why romance struggles with conflict, I think, is that nobody really spends enough time on their character goals.
And I feel like this sounds so like astronomical. Like, how do you even start deciding this? And something I do is I figure out my tropes. And you figure out your tropes of your story, this other stuff will kind of fall into place. So if we're talking and you're like, but I don't even know my character, like how am I supposed to figure out their goals and their flaws and their, you know, conflict? Start with tropes, because that's really the building blocks of your story and of your characters. If your story is an unrequited love, you know what you're, you know, you have one character that's always been in love with the other character. And then you can start building goals for each of those characters. You can start building the conflict between the two of them. Obviously, you can't write one book about unrequited love. You're going to have to throw some other ones in there. But start with tropes. Then you can move forward once you've assigned certain types of, you know, who's which in the characters, and then you move on from there. Because, you know, if he's a billionaire and she's a maid, right there, you're going to have different goals for each of these characters, and you're going to be able to grow stories from there. And every story has tropes. People say tropes are cliches. No. They're building blocks of stories. They just give you a starting point to then move forward with your goals. And if you're stuck in your story and you feel like, I don't know where to go with this, you probably don't know your tropes good enough. Take a step back, start with your tropes, which are going to be your bigger, and then go down to the end, which will be your conflict and your goals for your characters.
Perfect. And I would also add that what you should do is make sure your character goal, at least their outer goal, is something super specific. So if it's unrequited love, and that's the trope you're using, and you, instead of my goal being, I want to, you know, I want this other person to fall in love with me, that's not a specific goal. So what you need to do is say, okay, I want Angela to go to the dance with me. That's my goal. You know, that's a super specific goal. And then the reader can know whether that character met that goal or whether they didn't meet that goal. And you can have it both ways. You can write a book where they did get their goal at the end, or where they didn't get their goal at the end. So, but if it's super specific like that, you can create a scene where you as the reader know, yes, they met their goal, or no, they did not get their goal.
Yeah. I think all the plotters watching this are like, check, I'm on it. You know, like, you know, yeah, I'll definitely think about that, you know. And Panthers are like, yeah, so I have no idea. This is where I have evolved as a writer, because I'm definitely a pantser. I kept getting story ideas, and I felt like I knew this character, and they just were fun. They're just this person floating around in my brain, like in my house. And then like I would see fun scenes that they were in, and I was like, ooh, I want to write that scene. And so I would just take off on this fun little story idea that I had, and then in no time I would realize there was no conflict in my story. like none. And most of what I'd written up to that point was pretty boring, and I was the only one that was ever going to enjoy it. And so once I started learning about all of these important elements and why they mattered, I stopped letting myself just go freewheeling into a story. I'm never going to outline. I'm never going to say, like, I'm going this happened in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't write that way. But what I do is I make decisions before I start. And those decisions are, what is my theme? What is the lie that my character believes? What is the goal they want, or the goal they might, I figure out like all the goal stuff we talked about. And what is the conflict that's going to keep them from reaching those goals? I don't do anything anymore unless I figured out those things. And it has completely changed the way I write. And so many people talk about how every rough draft is going to be crappy, and that's not true. Like, you don't have to rewrite your story from scratch over and over again if you get the basic elements of it right.
Yep.
So get your structure right, get it, solid, build your foundation, and then the only rewrite you're going to have to do is just minor tweaking in word choice with your prose and dialogue from that point.
Absolutely. All right, let's just really quickly go over characters your readers will fall in love with, making likable characters, sympathetic characters, because this is like, we've been talking about characters this whole podcast. We just make it the character one. We'll talk about kissing next week. How about that?
Definitely. We need a whole podcast for kissing.
I know.
Forget a whole podcast about goals. We need a whole one for kissing.
So, tips on making your character really likable.
I think we've kind of touched on so many of the important points with the strengths and the flaws and the goals that we can I like that I made up this word. It's called root forable, because rootable sounds good. But like, make them root forable. Like, make them somebody that your character really wants to see them have a happy ending. Yes. Make them care about the character. I also like to really think about what makes a character come alive as a person. And sometimes that's hard to actually accomplish, because as writers, they're alive in our heads. But have we put enough on the paper to where the reader feels the same way? And so much of that is learning how to show a character through their actions, what they decide, what they say, how they interact with the other characters, and how they interact with the elements of the plot, to really let the reader feel like they're an actual person that they could like recognize on the street. What makes a hero in a romance especially likable, and this is just the way it is to make them everything that women want in a man, but is hard to find. And you will always hear the women say, my guy's like that. Well, that's awesome for you, but like, there are so many women out there who have been disappointed in love, or who struggle in bad relationships, or who, even if they love their husband greatly, definitely recognize his imperfections and his flaws. And so, like, for me, the biggest points of a hero, even though I do like to give him nice abs, is to make sure that like he's intuitive and connects with her, or sees her feelings in a way that still feels true. Does that make sense? So how can you make them have these qualities that we're looking for in a way that feels authentic and possible? So, if a guy in your story is just extremely intuitive, and he knows exactly what your female character is thinking at all times, and knows exactly, why she's feeling that way and how to fix it, that would be boring. But if you can have him at the important points of the story really touch like base with her, like, I see you, I see what you're feeling, I understand, and I care about it. Like, I think that those are the really attractive moments for your character. I think women like guys who are protective and who are capable and
Do
who
we
are
need
funny.
to go?
If my daughter wants to get picked up from school, maybe.
Oh, all right.
No, no.
I guess you can go get your daughter from school.
I got a little bit of leeway. I give myself an advance alarm, so I'm like,
I was going to say that I think also you need to base your likableness, or not likableness, but you need to base it off of what the external conflict is. So, like, for example, we talk a lot about like, don't write a perfect character, right? Well, in my book, A Contract with the Billionaire, she's pregnant and she has all of the conflict inside of her. It's not like his baby, but I was able to then write him. Like, yeah, he had some flaws, but he was just like the perfect guy because it's what she needed, because she was coming off of this horrible relationship. She's pregnant with her ex's baby. She signs a contract. Now she's married to, she's going to fake marry this billionaire. So she had all of the turmoil and struggle in the relationship, and I could just make him super nice. And it was amazing. I loved it because I was kind of like, I always have to give the guy like some issues, or he's, it's heartbroken. But with Reed, I just was able to just kind of dive into what I was like, this is what a perfect guy would be. However, if she did not have all the external conflict and have all the conflict going on with her, it would have been boring to read him. So you kind of have to play that, like, you got to give him likable, but you need to give him flaws to make him realistic enough. And the other thing is that, like, for the female character, everyone talks about Bella, right? How boring she was, but she was really a good placeholder for all of us. So we can go into and we can read it, and I can imagine myself as Bella, and I can imagine myself with all of my flaws, with these two amazing mystical creatures that are now obsessed with me. So you got to also play that with the girl, not making her so strong in personality one way or the other that it makes it hard for the reader to jump in. And most of the time, you're going to get people who say, I didn't like the character if the character is too harsh, because they just can't, that's not how they would act, or they don't have that self-confidence that character did, or they don't have that, like, I don't know, or like she was boring, which means that she was just like, everything started, boring is more like everything is happening to her and she is not doing things against these things. She's just standing there and all the arrows are hitting her. They're like, well, duck or move or get out of the way, like, stop this, So you kind of have to read what reviewers are saying and then pick apart, like, what does it really mean, what they're saying. Like, if a spicy person reads a sweet romance book, they'll say it was boring. Well, boring means it didn't have sex in it. So therefore, maybe you're just not my reader. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that we could say, but I think you guys all know the answers, just because if you watch a show or a movie or read a book, this is where you just kind of have to, like, do your homework, because there's so many different options out there. Just, like, invest time in exploring other stories out there and make notes. Like, why did I like this character?
Yes. And Brandon Sanderson has a really great class online on YouTube. You can search it, about writing sympathetic characters. And he lists out qualities of somebody who is a sympathetic character. One of them is being very capable. That makes somebody a likable character, or being sympathetic and showing sympathy for someone else. So there's a bunch of them. You can go do your research, but we are out of time, unfortunately, so we can't talk anymore. But we will come back next week and talk about incredible kiss scenes and all our tips on that. So
not tips on how to kiss well. We don't want to get on that side of YouTube.
How to write a good kissing scene.
I'm meeting next week. I think what we're going to talk about, though, are the stages of intimacy first, because I think we need to discuss those before we go into talking about kissing. So February, it's Valentine's Day. It's perfect and romance. So we're going to talk about how to weave all of that in, and we'll probably talk about, like, good, like, conflict, not conflict, but a good moment. Like, what's really good to pull a character's apart.
Awesome. All right, catch us next week. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.